Her true story, from Kentucky. My son threw hot water on me and said, "Die somewhere else," so I got up and took the title to the house with me. He wanted me gone. I took the roof instead. "Bill?" I asked gently, standing by the sink. "Did you remember to pay the electric bill this month?" The air in the kitchen, already thick with steam from the boiling pot on the stove, seemed to freeze. My son whipped his head around, eyes blazing, like I had just slapped him. "Who the hell cares who pays it?" he snapped, his voice rising too fast. "You do not know how to pay a damn bill yourself? You want me to teach you how to swipe a card now? God, you are getting dumber by the day, always flapping your mouth about things that are not your business. You are a damn old nag, that is what you are." I blinked, stunned, but I did not move. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. The spoon in his hand clattered against the floor, the sound sharp and final. He reached for the pot of noodles boiling on the stove. I barely had time to register what he was doing before the scalding liquid splashed across my arm. The pain was instant. My skin screamed. I gasped and stepped back, the floor shifting beneath me. My hand clutched at the countertop as I fought to stay upright. "Jesus Christ, Bill," his wife shouted, but it was not concern in her voice, it was fury. At the inconvenience, at the noise, at me. "You should not have said anything," she spat at me. "You keep stirring up trouble in this house, and for what? For attention? We feed you, we let you live here for free, and this is how you repay us? Why do you not just get out and die somewhere else already? We do not care. You hear me? We do not give a damn." I looked at her, my face wet, not with tears, but with shock. She stood there, arms crossed, lips curled in disgust, like I had ruined her dinner. In the corner of the kitchen, my grandson sat frozen at the little table, his fingers wrapped around a juice box, his eyes wide and dark and too quiet for a 6-year-old. He did not speak. He just looked at me like he could not quite understand what had just happened. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to tell him it was going to be okay. But it was not. My arm throbbed, angry and red, skin already blistering. I looked down at the burn, then back at the two people standing in front of me, my own son and his wife, so ready to throw me out, to discard me like leftovers. From the meal, they never thanked me for cooking. I said nothing. I turned slowly, still gripping the counter for balance, and walked out of the kitchen. No one followed me. No one asked if I was okay. I passed the living room where I used to sit and read stories to that little boy. Past the hallway where my son used to come running when he scraped his knees, crying out for Mama. That word meant something once. It used to belong to me. I reached my room, closed the door gently behind me and locked it. Then I leaned against the wood, letting myself slide down until I was sitting on the floor. The pain in my arm was sharp, but what cut deeper was the silence from the other side of the door. Not even a knock. I peeled off the wet fabric stuck to my skin and bit my lip to keep from crying out. I wrapped my arm with a towel, pressing gently. My breath came shallow, but my mind was clear, clearer than it had been in months. They wanted me gone, and suddenly I realized I was ready to go, but not the way they thought. For too long I had stayed quiet. For too long I had made myself small to fit into a house I had built with my own hands, paid for with the wages of 2 jobs, bought while my husband was still alive, and this family was still worth saving. They forgot that. They thought I was just an old woman with nowhere to go. They thought wrong. I stood up slowly, cradling my burned arm, and walked to my dresser. In the very back of the bottom drawer, under old sweaters and folded linens, was a small wooden box. I pulled it out and opened it with hands that barely shook. Inside, still crisp and creased from the day it was printed, was the original title deed to the house. My name in bold ink. No one else's. They never asked, they just assumed. I had let them, until tonight. I closed the box, set it on the bed, and started packing. Not much, just what I needed. A few changes of clothes, my toothbrush, a small photo of my husband, and a worn paperback I still had not finished reading. I moved slowly, quietly, methodically, like I had 100 times in my life, cleaning up messes no one else cared to notice. By the time I zipped up my bag, the house was quiet. My son and his wife had retreated into their bedroom, confident in their cruelty, content to let me sit and suffer. I stepped out of my room, bag in hand, and walked past their door. Still no sound. No apology, not even a glance. The burn on my arm pulsed with every step I took. But my back was straighter than it had been in years, and as I opened the front door, the night air rushed over me like freedom. They wanted me gone, so I left, but not empty-handed, not broken, Jessica quiet, and with the title to the house still bearing my name. I did not cry on the bus ride. The lights flickered above my head, and the windows shivered each time the wheels hit a pothole. I cradled my burned arm beneath my sweater and looked out into the dark Kentucky roads I had known since I was a girl. There was no one sitting beside me, just a worn overnight bag on my lap and a silence that stretched longer than the road ahead. I got off in a town no one in my son's house even remembered I'd lived in, a town with more trees than people now, where the diner still served meatloaf with white gravy, and the mailman still waved, even if he had not seen you in 20 years. I walked the last 2 blocks to the old house, mine, always mine. It sat just outside the edge of town, past the Methodist church and the feed store. The porch steps creaked just the same, and the wind still knew how to whistle through the broken screen door. The key was still under the 3rd flower pot. Inside, the house smelled of wood and dust and memory. I turned on the lights one by one, like waking someone from a long nap. The kitchen was smaller than I remembered, the curtains more yellowed, but the table still stood. The coffee mug with the chip in the handle still waited behind the 2nd cabinet, and in the back bedroom, the cedar wardrobe still held what I had left behind. I lit a small lamp and sat on the edge of the bed. Our bed, once. Mine and Thomas. We bought the house in 1986. He had just gotten on full-time at the auto shop, and I had taken extra shifts at the hospital. He fixed mufflers and aligned tires during the day. I cleaned wounds and held hands through the night. We did not have much, but we had a plan. We saved every coin, every overtime check. We skipped vacations, said no to new clothes, turned down parties, and brick by brick, dollar by dollar, we built a home. Not just any home, our home. It was a little 2-story place with chipped paint and a stubborn door that stuck in the summer. We laid the tile ourselves in the kitchen, and Thomas built the porch swing for our 10th anniversary. We planted marigolds out front because he said they made the house look like it smiled. Thomas died in 2003. It was not sudden, but it still felt like someone yanked the floor out from under me. Lung cancer, too many years in the garage, breathing in fumes, refusing to quit. He used to say, if I stop moving, I will die, and he was right. He slowed down, and then he was gone. He left the house to me, of course. Not that anyone questioned it. I had always handled the bills. I was the one who made sure the mortgage was paid, the pipes didn't freeze, the roof didn't leak. When Bill got married, I thought it would be a good idea to let him and his new wife move into the house. They were just starting out, and I thought, why not? It is big enough for all of us. I moved into the smaller bedroom. I gave up the master. I cooked for them. I cleaned after them. I even watched their baby while they worked. For free, of course. I never asked for a dime. I remember the day she moved in. My daughter-in-law. She walked through the front door with her heels clicking against the floor, nose wrinkled like the place already smelled old. She ran her fingers across the windowsill, looked at the wallpaper, and asked if they could renovate. Not once did she thank me. Not once did she ask about the history of the house or what it meant to me. It was not long before she stopped calling me Mrs. Adams and started saying her in that tone, like I was something to be tolerated. Does she always rearrange the dishes like that? Why is she always folding the towels wrong? Tell her to stay out of our bedroom. Bill never corrected her. Never once. But I told myself to let it go. It was just growing pains. They were young. They would learn. I was wrong. The house that Thomas and I built with our bare hands slowly became a place where I was a stranger. I went from homeowner to helper, from mother to maid. They started making decisions without me. Repairs, furniture, even changing the locks once, before I found out, but I never changed the deed. That little secret was the only thing I had left. I opened the cedar wardrobe, reached past the winter coats and pulled out a wooden box wrapped in an old pillowcase. My hands trembled, not from age, but from memory. Inside was the title deed, the official paper with the county seal notarized and filed, dated 1986, and my name, Margaret L. Adams, typed in clean black ink. It had never been amended, never transferred, no additions, no joint ownership, just me. I stared at it for a long time, ran my fingers along the edges. The paper had yellowed slightly, but the ink was still bold. My husband had signed it too, back when his hands were still strong and sure. That signature was a promise, a vow, that no matter what happened, this home would be mine. They had forgotten that. I had let them forget. But tonight, I remembered. I remembered every late night Thomas came home with oil on his hands and a kiss on his lips. I remembered every check I signed, every night I went without so we could make that next payment. I remembered the first dinner we had in this house, sitting on folding chairs before we even had a table. And I remembered who I was. Not a burden, not a guest. A builder, a provider, a wife, a mother, the woman who held this house together long before anyone else stepped inside it. I folded the title deed carefully and placed it back inside the box. Then I locked it and slid it under the bed. Not for hiding, just for safekeeping. Until the time came, because the house was still mine. And soon, they would remember that too. No one called. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even after the burn on my arm began to blister and peel. I sat alone on the back seat of a nearly empty bus, my bag tucked under my legs, the sleeve of my sweater damp from the ointment I had smeared on the wound. The engine hummed beneath me, a steady mechanical rhythm that somehow made me feel less alone. I looked out the window, watching the trees thin into fields, then roll into gentle Kentucky hills. Towns passed like breath, silent, unnoticed, indifferent. They had let me walk out without a word. I did not leave a note. I did not need to. They wanted me gone. And now I was. It took 4 hours and 1 transfer before I stepped off at the little station near Lark Hollow, a name no one from my son's life would recognize. It used to be our weekend place. Thomas and I bought the land when we were younger, hoping to turn it into a quiet escape. We never got to finish the porch or plant the garden, but we laid the foundation together. He poured the concrete himself, his hands rough and steady. That place held his fingerprints in the frame of every window. The house was small, only 1 story, tucked behind a line of old elms. The front gate squeaked the same way it had 20 years ago, and the mailbox still had our name, barely legible under the rust. As I approached, I saw someone across the road, an old woman tending to her rose bushes. I paused. She squinted, then her face lit up. "Margaret?" she called, stepping toward the fence. "Lord, is that really you?" "Hi, Ellie," I said softly. My voice cracked a little. "It's been a while." "Too long," she smiled. "Come over for supper, would you? I still make that peach cobbler you used to love." I nodded, warmth creeping into the corners of my heart. That was more kindness than I had been shown in years. Inside, the cottage had not changed much. The furniture was still covered in white cloths. Dust clung to the windows, and the air smelled like cedar and thyme. I opened the windows, let in the breeze. I swept the floor, unpacked what little I had brought. I found the kettle Thomas used to insist made the best tea, and boiled water just to hear it whistle again. That night, Ellie made chicken pot pie with biscuit crust, and we talked like we had never stopped. Her husband passed a few years back. Her children moved away. She had a dog now, an old beagle named Whiskey, who snored louder than he barked. It was simple, slow conversation. No raised voices, no accusations, just peace. When I returned home that evening, I lit a single lamp in the kitchen and pulled out a clean piece of paper. It was time to write a new will. I had written the old one years ago, back when I still believed in gratitude and assumed kindness would come full circle. It left everything to Bill. The house, the land, the little savings account I had built over the years from Social Security and careful coupons. But now I saw things clearly. My heart did not ache with betrayal. It did not burn with revenge. It simply understood. People do not always become what you raised them to be. Sometimes they become what you tolerated too long. I sat at the table for nearly 2 hours, listing every item of value. The house in town, the cottage here, the little funds I still had tucked away, and I wrote new names beside them. Not Bill, not his wife, certainly not anyone who had watched me burn and turned away. I listed Ellie's church, a women's shelter in Lexington, and one name that surprised even me, my granddaughter Lily. She was only 12, but I remembered how she once picked wild flowers and left them on my pillow when I had the flu. There was still softness in her, untouched by her mother's cruelty. By midnight, the will was finished. It was not anger that drove my hand. It was clarity. The same kind of clarity you feel when you finally admit a wound will not heal where it was made. I looked at the phone for a long while. It had been years since I last spoke to Ruth Bennett. She had been my best friend in nursing school, my roommate through 2 years of long nights and longer shifts. We lost touch after Thomas passed. She moved to Frankfurt, started a practice, got married to a pharmacist who wore sweater vests and had a laugh like a sneeze. I heard she became a lawyer after her second career change, specializing in elder rights, someone once told me. I picked up the receiver and dialed her number. My fingers remembered it before my brain did. 3 rings. Then a voice. Ruth Bennett, this is she. There was a pause when I said my name. Margaret, she breathed, her voice thick with disbelief. Oh my God. I thought you were. Are you okay? I've been better, I said, trying to keep it even. But I'm still standing, and I need your help. I'm in, she said before I could explain. Whatever it is, I'm in. And just like that, the past wrapped its arms around me. This time not to hurt me, but to hold me up. I hung up the phone, stepped outside, and stood on the porch. Thomas never got to finish. I looked out into the night. No fear, no regret, just a calm certainty rising in my chest like the wind before a storm. Because I knew, finally, what needed to be done. Ruth arrived 3 days later, stepping out of her car in a cloud of dust and autumn leaves. She wore a navy suit jacket over jeans, her gray hair pulled into the same no-nonsense bun I remembered from our nursing days. But there was a different weight in her step now, a steadiness, a kind of quiet conviction that only comes from living long enough to stop asking for permission. She hugged me tightly. Neither of us said much. We did not need to. Inside, at the kitchen table, I laid out every document I had saved. Birth certificates, utility bills in my name, tax filings going back years. But most importantly, I unfolded the title deed again and laid it before her, like a confession. She scanned it carefully, tracing the corners with her finger. This is gold, she said. Uncontested, no cosigner. Still in your name and never transferred. They never asked me to, I said. They just assumed. Took over. And I let them. Her eyes flicked up. That ends now. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing everything. Ruth's legal pad filled with notes, dates, names, remarks. Every insult, every bruise, every time I was called a burden, a ghost, a leftover. You remember the exact dates? She asked, as I recounted the slights. I do, I said. Because you do not forget the day your child tells you to disappear. She nodded, her pen moving. Good. Keep going. So I told her. I told her about the day Bill's wife hid my medication because she thought I was faking my back pain. About the time they left me home alone during a snowstorm with no heat while they went to Gatlinburg. About how my name was never on the birthday cakes. How I was not allowed to sit at the main table during Thanksgiving. How the house I paid for became a prison made of manners and expectation. I showed her the burn on my arm, still red, still angry. Ruth's mouth pressed into a tight line. This is elder abuse, Margaret, she said quietly. Plain and simple. You're not just within your rights. You're overdue for justice. She reached for her bag and pulled out a folder. I'm going to draft an eviction, she said. We'll file it in county court. Once the judge sees this documentation, it won't even go to hearing. You'll have them out within 2 weeks. Can I do that? I asked, not because I doubted the law, but because a part of me still wondered if it made me cruel. You must do that, she replied. Otherwise, you're enabling the same people who hurt you. This isn't revenge, Margaret. It's correction. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt my life wasn't over. It had just paused. And now, it was starting again. The next morning, I logged into my retirement account. I had not touched it in years, barely even looked at the balance. I had always told myself it was for emergencies. Well, what do you call being burned and thrown out of your own home? I transferred a few $1,000s into my checking account. Enough for legal fees. Enough to remind myself I was not broke, not helpless, not finished. Ruth called that afternoon with a draft. We'll finalize it today, she said. Then file first thing tomorrow. She read the language aloud, legal terms layered over raw truth. The occupant has no lease agreement. The property owner, Margaret L. Adams, has retained sole legal ownership since 1986. The occupants have repeatedly demonstrated verbal, emotional, and physical mistreatment toward the petitioner, including one documented instance of physical harm on insert date. She paused. "You sure you're ready?" she asked. I closed my eyes. I saw Bill's face the night he screamed at me. I saw his wife's sneer. I saw my grandson watching from the corner, silent, helpless. Then I saw Thomas's signature on the deed. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The final papers were printed, signed, and notarized in the back room of the county clerk's office. Ruth stood beside me as I wrote my name. Slow, deliberate, steady. Each letter carved in ink like a line drawn in the sand. I looked up when I finished. "That's it," Ruth said, her voice softer now. "They'll be served within 48 hours. The woman behind the desk stamped the document and slid it into a file. It was done. I stepped outside into the daylight, and for the first time in years, I did not feel small. I felt tall, even if my back was curved. I felt whole, even if parts of me were still healing. I had just evicted my own son, but what I had really done was reclaim my life. That house had been mine for almost 4 decades, not just by law, but by love. I had built it with Thomas, maintained it through loss, shared it out of generosity, not obligation, and now I had taken it back, not with shouting, not with fists, but with truth. Truth on paper, truth with weight, truth that would be delivered to their front door, like a final notice. They wanted me gone. Instead, I made them leave. 10 days passed. The air had turned colder, the trees in Lark Hollow shedding their last golden leaves, like truths finally uncovered. I spent my mornings sitting on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, sipping weak coffee and watching the quiet world return to its rhythm. Inside, the house was warm, my bed was soft, and my name was still on every bill, every document, every memory that had not been rewritten by someone else's entitlement. Then, on the 11th day, Ruth called. "They've been served," she said. "This morning, the sheriff hand-delivered the order at 9:17 IEM. I did not smile, but I felt a shift inside me, like an old door swinging open again, finally, without the weight pressing against it. "He," said the wife, "screamed," Ruth added. "Your son tried to argue with the deputy. They've got 5 days to vacate." I sat very still. 5 days. That was less time than they had ever given me to recover from an insult. Less time than they had ever spent wondering if I was okay. Less time than I needed to realize they had stopped seeing me as human. That evening, the phone rang. I saw the name before I heard the voice. Oh, I let it ring twice before pressing silence. Then it rang again, and again. I let it go to voicemail. The 4th time I picked up the receiver, but I did not say a word. His voice cracked through the line like a storm breaking glass. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" Pause. "You evicted us? Are you serious?" I still said nothing. "Where are you even staying? You think this is some game? You think you can just throw us out like that?" Then softer. "Quiet. Mom, please. Look, we were just stressed, okay? Things got heated, but it's still your family. We're your family. It's family." The words sat in my ear like vinegar. He kept talking, his tone shifting like sand. Rage, then guilt, then desperation. "We can fix this. You don't have to do this. Just talk to me. Please, Mom." I hung up, not in anger, just The next morning, 2 patrol cars pulled up outside the house I once called mine. 2 officers stepped out, badges glinting in the morning sun, clipboards in hand. I did not need to be there to know exactly how it unfolded. Ruth had already explained it all. They would knock, they would state the court order, they would give them one final warning, and then, if resistance came, they would be removed. Not by force, by law. The same law they had ignored when they called me worthless, when they threw out my blankets, when they shoved my dinner plate to the side because guests eat last. I imagined Bill standing in the doorway, eyes wide with disbelief, mouth fumbling for words that no longer mattered, his wife yelling, face flushed with outrage, trying to argue with paperwork, and my grandson, quiet, confused, watching again from the corner, like he had that night in the kitchen. I prayed someone would comfort him, because they were not being evicted by a stranger. They were being evicted by the woman they once called burden, the woman they burned and left behind. And now the law said, what I had not needed to scream. This is not your home anymore. By sundown, they were gone. Boxes shoved hastily into their car, things left behind in piles, things they once thought belonged to them, but nothing in that house had ever been theirs. Not the walls, not the roof, and certainly not the woman who built it. I did not watch. I did not need to. I sat in my little cottage, a quiet meal in front of me, my bandaged arm finally beginning to heal. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. I was not angry. I was not vindictive. But I was no longer silent. They had dragged my name through their version of family, and now the court had spoken mine in return, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. The woman they once called a leech had taken back the very house they'd built their arrogance on. They called me dead weight, and now they had nowhere to land. I never stepped foot back inside that house. Not once. Even after the locks were changed, even after the echoes of their shouting had long faded from the walls, it was not fear that kept me away. It was peace. I had reclaimed what was mine, but I had no desire to live among old ghosts. Instead, I listed the house for rent. Not with a big agency, not with flashy ads, just a simple notice through a local paper and a church bulletin in town. I wasn't looking for profit. I was looking for someone who needed it the way I once had. It only took a week before I got the first call. Her name was Mabel, 70 years old, thin voice, shaky hands. She had been sleeping in her car behind a laundromat ever since her daughter told her, "This isn't your home anymore." I did not ask for details. I did not need to. Pain recognizes pain. She moved in 3 days later. I helped her bring in her suitcase and a blanket with daisies on it. She stood in the kitchen, my kitchen, and looked around with quiet awe, like she could not believe it was real. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw the pantry was already stocked. "There's heat in here," she whispered. "Real heat." "Yes," I said, "and clean towels, and no one yelling." She looked at me like I had given her a miracle, but I knew I had only given her what we all deserve: safety. I partnered with a nonprofit a week after Mabel moved in, an organization that works with displaced seniors, especially women, those discarded by their own families, abandoned after a lifetime of giving. I told them I had a house, and that half of anything I earned from it would go directly to them. The other half? I kept that for the upkeep, the repairs, the occasional pot of stew I dropped off when the weather got cold. It was no longer a house for entitlement, it was a house for refuge. One morning, I stood on the front lawn and looked at the place, not as a wound, but as something that had healed over with purpose. The paint still peeled a bit near the porch, the flower bed was dry, but inside there was warmth. Inside, no one was afraid of asking about the electric bill. I took out a small wooden sign I had carved myself in the evenings, my hands steady with resolve. I hung it right above the mailbox, where anyone passing by would see. It read, "A safe place, built by a mother who was once thrown out of the house she built." I did not need applause. I did not want revenge, but I wanted this. I wanted every woman who walked by, who heard my story, who sat with bruises hidden under long sleeves, to know they were not forgotten, that there was still room in the world for them, still roofs, still keys, still names on deeds, and sometimes, still justice, quiet, steady, unshakable. The letter came on a Tuesday. No return address, just my name, written in familiar, awkward handwriting across the front of a plain white envelope. I knew it was from him the moment I saw it. I waited until after dinner, until the dishes were done and the dog fed, before I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it. The first words were shaky, like he had rewritten them too many times. "Mom, I do not know how to start this. I guess I never learned how to say sorry the right way." He talked about the eviction, about how it humiliated them. He said they were blindsided, as if he had not thrown the first stone. He said his wife had left him, taken their son, and moved back with her parents. He said he was sleeping on a friend's couch. He said he missed me. "I don't blame you. I really don't. I wish you could forgive me. I wish I could go back. I was angry. I was stupid. I thought you'd always be there, no matter what. And I guess I forgot what it meant that the house had your name on it. You built it. You did everything for us. And I spit on that. I'm sorry. God, Mom, I'm sorry. I wish you'd call." The letter ended with 7 words. "Please, Mom, tell me it's not too late." I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, and I felt not bitterness, not satisfaction, just stillness. There was no fire in my chest anymore, no sharp edge in my stomach, no heat behind my eyes, only a quiet ache, the kind that comes after a wound has already healed over. I folded the letter carefully, walked to the back porch and lit a match. I held the envelope over the flame until it caught, then dropped it into the metal tin I used for kindling scraps. The paper curled, turned black, and disappeared. Smoke drifted into the night sky like a whisper, too late to change anything. I did not need his apology, and I did not need to answer it, but I knew someone else would, one day. So that evening, I pulled out the old tape recorder I kept in the hallway drawer. I sat by the window with a blanket across my lap, looked out at the stars, and pressed record. I spoke slowly, clearly, just like I used to when I read bedtime stories to my grandson. Only this time, the story was real. I told the truth, not the pretty version, not the kind wrapped in forgiveness just to keep the peace. I spoke about the day my son burned me, about the silence that followed, about the eviction notice, signed in my own name. I spoke about the nights I cried quietly so the child in the next room wouldn't hear, about the dinners I cooked without being thanked, about the titles they took without ever earning. I spoke about the cottage, the peace, the sign I hung above the mailbox, and I spoke about Lily, my granddaughter, and how I hoped she would grow up and find that tape one day. I ended with these words: if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone, and if no one ever told you why, now you know. I didn't leave because I was weak. I left because silence was the only thing they gave me, and I chose to turn it into strength. Remember that, sweetheart. Speak up, stand tall, and never let anyone convince you that love means staying where you are not safe. I labeled the tape in red ink, "For Lily, when you're old enough to ask." Then I placed it in a small wooden box, sealed it shut, and tucked it into the back of the wardrobe. It would wait there, quiet and still, just like I had for so many years. But one day, it would speak, and someone would finally understand why Grandma never came back. I sit on the porch most mornings now. The wood beneath my chair is warm with age, creaking in all the right places. My coffee stays hot longer in this quiet town, maybe because there's no rush. The air is crisp, and the trees, those old guardians of the lane, bow gently in the breeze, like they remember me. My arm still bears the scar. It runs from my elbow to my wrist, a pale pink memory etched into my skin. But the ache is gone, not just from the wound, from everything. Sometimes a neighbor's child comes by. Sarah, her name is, 17, maybe 18, with a curious mind and a notebook always in her lap. She asks me questions when she thinks I am feeling chatty. One afternoon, she looked at me and said, "Mrs. Adams, were you ever scared of being alone like this?" I smiled into my mug. "No, sweetheart," I told her, "because alone isn't the same as forgotten, and fear's got a hard time taking root in a heart that's been through fire." She asked why I never remarried, why I never went back to reclaim what was mine. I laughed, soft and full. "Demi already gave it back," I said. "When they walked out, they left behind something they never really owned. Peace." She looked confused, but I saw the gears turning. I leaned forward, resting my hand on the rail. The morning sun danced across the porch. My words came slow, but clear. People think old means fragile, that we're brittle and small and easy to dismiss, but they're wrong. The truth is, older folks just get tired of shouting. We've spent our lives being loud in all the quiet ways, waking up early, holding families together, working jobs we didn't love for people we did. We don't stop fighting. We just stop announcing the fight. She nodded, scribbling something down. I pointed toward the house across the field. My old place, now someone else's home, filled with laughter that didn't mock and warmth that didn't burn. "That roof over there," I said, "it ain't just wood and shingles, it's memory, it's years. And even though I don't live there anymore, it still knows my name. Every beam, every nail, it remembers who laid it down." She looked where I pointed. "You built it?" "I built what mattered," I said. "The love, the structure, the safety." She was quiet for a while after that. Sometimes I wonder if she'll grow up and remember me the way I remember Thomas, not with stories of pain, but with a kind of reverence for those who endure and still choose softness. Later that week, I walked the path behind the cottage and looked up at my new roof. It's nothing fancy, just good, solid work. I had it redone last spring when the weather stripped away some shingles. But when I looked at it, I realized something that hadn't hit me before. A roof is not made from nails and tar. A home is not brick and foundation. It's not where you sleep. It's where your soul rests. And this quiet porch, this patch of earth, this new chapter, I built it, not with money, with choice, with silence that became strength, with hands that still knew how to care even after they'd been burned. The house across town has new tenants now. Mabel's still there, and another woman just moved in, left behind by her son after she was diagnosed with arthritis. I visit sometimes, but not often. It belongs to them now, in the best way. It has purpose again, and so do I. In the evenings, when the wind cools and the light bends low, I sit here and think of all the things I used to believe were gone forever. My voice, my dignity, my place in the world. But none of it was lost, just buried, waiting, like seeds under winter soil. Now, the garden's blooming again, and I am still standing, still building, still home. And if anyone ever asks how it ended, how the woman who got burned walked away with the house, I'll tell them this. He wanted me out of his life, so I gave him what he asked for. I walked away, and I took the roof with me, because he wanted me gone. But I am still here, still with a home, built by these hands, claimed by my name, and never again left in silence. Thank you, sweetheart, for sitting with me through this story. If it reminded you of someone, your mother, your grandmother, maybe even a part of yourself that's been quiet for too long, then I hope you carry it with you, because silence does not mean weakness, and being forgotten does not mean we are gone. Here on Grandma, True Stories, we speak what others thought we'd bury. We tell the truth, slow, steady, and strong, for every woman who's been cast aside and every grandmother who still remembers. So if this story touched your heart, subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Let your voice join ours, because revenge has no expiration date. And when a grandma speaks, this time the world will listen.